this going. So first of all, hi everyone. So my name is Caroline Turner. My pronouns are she, her. I'll come on to explain who I am in a moment. I'm the CEO here at Crease Puddle, and this is a little bit about what we do. So if you don't know what Crease Puddle is, essentially, I guess we are a one-stop shop for all things neurodiversity, including audits, doing audits in organisations, both large and small. Impact assessments, quality impact assessments is an increasingly in-demand service we provide. You developing your own toolkits, your own resources, training your own staff so that we can give you the skills that we have so it becomes embedded and sustainable for your organisation. And then we support you also with workplace needs assessments, cognitive assessments, and also providing coaching and co-coaching. We do those services through privately, as in like a direct contract, but we also do them through Access to Work as well. So if you have any Access to Work queries, please get in touch. Now, so who am I, and why am I worthy of your time this morning? So fingers crossed you're going to get something out of today. My name is Caroline, like I say. I'm more than happy for you to ask me questions in the Q&A. I really want this to be a dialogue. So even though we're going to have a conversation, Charlie and I, throughout this webinar, I'm hoping that that you'll ask questions in the Q&A, but you'll also swap some good practice, make reference to things that you found useful so that we can get the most out of this session today. So as I say, I'm CEO here at Crease Puddle. We're based in York in the north of England, but we operate all of the world, which sounds very grand, doesn't it? And we have delivered overseas. We do a lot online, but we also do a lot face-to-face. My trainers and consultants are scattered around the country as we speak, and we close Neurodiversity Acceptance Week for the fourth time, I think, that we've run this now. So and I'm neurodivergent myself as well. So I have a diagnosis of ADHD, and I come from a neurodivergent family. And most of my team here at Crease Puddle are neurodivergent, or were the parents and carers of individuals who are neurodivergent as well. My background is in policing, so I did 21 years for North Yorkshire Police, and it's really good to see so many police forces on the call today. Well done you, and it's great to work with you still. On our HR programs and training courses. And I suppose for me, it's a job that I love, and it is a job which is constantly changing and evolving and requiring us as professionals and industry leads to keep up to date on what you as organisations want from us and our expertise. So this kind of webinar for us is obviously, fingers crossed, it's going to be useful for you, but equally it's good for us to know what questions you're asking as individuals and professionals in this space, so that we know when we're looking at that horizon how we can make our services fit for purpose and value for money. So that's enough about me. Charlie, I wonder if I can just ask you to introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Yeah, I just noticed my name's missing off that slide now. So
yeah,
nothing like preparing things at the last minute, is it? But yeah, my name's Charlie Hart. I'm also known on social media as Awesome Charlie with an AU for autistic. I am openly autistic. I'm multiply neurodivergent because I also have complex PTSD and ADHD as well. But I think my main neurotype is autistic. So I've worked in HR for 20 years, so mainly in analytical roles, HR systems, support and producing MI and managing projects, that kind of thing. So I excel at Excel. And when I discovered I was autistic in 2018, after struggling for about 15 years with being in a role that I was really good at, but struggling with things like the sensory and social minefield that is the professional workplace, I realised I was autistic. I got really interested in neurodiversity at that point. So about 18 months ago, I quit my HR day job, and this is what I do all the time. I'm either writing or creating content about neurodiversity inclusion, or I'm presenting and training and doing keynote speeches about it. So, and I'm here to share my thoughts about how you can approach the topic of incorporating neuro inclusion into your policies and processes.
Yeah, thank you for that, Charlie. And just to give you a little bit of history, because Charlie and I have known each other a long time, and as some of you know my history and background, it was back in sort of 2017, 18. It was a really lonely place on LinkedIn talking about neurodiversity. And Charlie was really one of the kind of, I suppose, was already talking about neuro inclusion back in the day, and I was following her as somebody new into the private sector, moving from public. And she messaged me one day just to sort of say, oh, do you know what? I've got your back on something. And we just developed a relationship from there, and it's been wonderful to kind of see the value that Charlie can bring into this space kind of develop over that time. And I would absolutely encourage any and all of you to reach out to Charlie for those services and her expertise and speaking pieces. And I was going to say, you're available on LinkedIn, Charlie, aren't you? But that sounds like we're selling you as
I'm on LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I've just started a newsletter on Substack. So I did mean to put a QR code for that in here, but I completely forgot. But my website, awesomecharlie.co.uk, it's got all my links on. So go and have a look at that. You can book an online free intro chat with me if you want through that, but not this week or next because I'm ridiculously busy. But just to say, I've been a fan of Caroline and the work of Creased Puddle for quite some time as well. And when I discovered the neurodiversity movement and wanted to talk about it, I actually went to an event that was presented by Cheryl Winters from Creased Puddle, and it was the first time I've ever seen anybody accurately and clearly explain what neurodiversity is and why neuro-inclusion matters and what it is to be neurodivergent without getting any of the terminology mixed up or saying anything that just wasn't accurate. So they've kind of been role models to me.
Oh, it's like a love-in. I'm loving this.
I do like a mutual appreciation society.
I do. We've not scripted that at all. But no, and I think the benefit of that is that we've seen so many changes over the years, haven't we, as well?
Yeah.
You know, how this movement has changed and the language has changed and the dynamic of it has changed and the commercialization has changed and the request and the demand from organizations has changed as well. So yeah, we'll try and get a little bit of that in. Thanks for that, Charlie.
No problem.
Okay, and then just a little bit of like what to expect here. We've got about 3/4 of an hour to look at some very specific areas around HR. Please do ask questions in the chat. And we are recording the session. And if you've registered, obviously you will get access to it. You don't have to sit still. If movement is the way that you better engage with learning and language and absorbing information, then please do. So even if it's playing with a bulldog clip or a piece of a rubber band or even juddering a leg, walking around your island whilst you listen to this, all is good with us. So you do you, and you are all welcome for sure. Don't forget you can react as well, so you can send us a little reaction as well as put in, like I say, questions in the chat. So we're going to focus on, we wanted to try, because we've only got a little bit of a short amount of time to look at policy and introducing change and managing change and starting those conversations. So let's jump straight in then. Charlie, my first question to you is about creating your own inclusive policies. And so how do we do that? Do you want me to put the slide up now?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of words. So okay. I'm not here to write your policies for you unless you want to engage some consultancy, which you can do through Creased Puddle if you want, but more to share the methodology that I would go through if I was tackling this topic. So next slide, please. So I think that this requires a robust approach. So when I tackle this, I use project management principles. So it's almost like I'm going through a project, I'm planning it, I'm thinking about who needs to be involved, who needs to be consulted, who's the executive sponsor, how we do it and why. The why is really important, actually. And it's not like I think that we should find a mechanism for exploiting the talents of neurodivergent staff to progress capitalism. It's not about that. It's about selling this to your executive sponsor, your senior leadership team, the board, maybe your stakeholders, and obviously the people that it affects within the organisation. Some of the things that you'll consider when looking at the how, and that's very, very specific to individual policies, but there's some broad things to consider. And then how we check it's working, how we monitor and review it and continuously improve it, report back on how this was a good thing to do. So next slide, please. So firstly, when you're doing a project, which is how I see this, it's really important to know who is involved and who you need to communicate with and to what extent. So it's not like you have an email distribution list of anyone and everyone who might be interested and tell them every little thing that's going on. But somebody is responsible for this. It's down to someone to make it happen. And that could be your head of equality and diversity and inclusion. It could be your HR director. It could be somebody on the executive board, but someone's got the final say over this. And there are various people who are accountable that if it goes wrong, that it's their heads on the block. There's people who can help you get this right, people who will be affected. So those are people you can sort with. And then people who might like to be informed. So that could be your external stakeholders. It could be members of your governance structure. It could be your clients, your suppliers. So I would suggest creating a RACI model, you call this, and identifying who those people are. And the people who you consult to get it right, it's about making sure that you consult them throughout the process rather than as an afterthought, because that is a missed opportunity. Next slide, please. So in terms of the business case, this is really critical for getting the buy-in of your leadership team and possibly your stakeholders or your members, depends on the kind of organisation. But you've really got to get across that this isn't some fluffy, soft HR thing. It's not something that we want to do to be woke or to do nice things for disabled people. It's a concrete thing that we do to benefit the business. Yes, it benefits employees as well, but it is for the good of the business. So this ranges from complying with employment law, and this matters because if you don't do that, then it could cost you money, it could cost you reputation, it could cost you employees, it could cost you customers, market share. So we have to get this right. But to be honest, the employment legislation sets the bar really low, because actually, if we go above and beyond that, we can help all individuals to thrive in their roles, and that's a win-win situation. So I talked about reputation. In HR, in the CIPD courses that I've done, we call that the employer value proposition. So this is how you appear to potential employees. This is what you offer. So it isn't just about your contracts of employment, the tenure of the role, the salary, remuneration package. It's about, are you going to treat people in the way that they want to be treated? Are you going to afford them agency and options over how they work? Will there be progression opportunities that aren't denied to them due to some protected characteristic or something? So this is what the workforce of the future are going to be looking for. And it isn't just about protected characteristics. It's about when you're choosing where to spend a huge chunk of your life, that it's going to meet your needs and fit into your life, not burn you out, and you won't be overlooked for promotion. And yeah, it's just basically about being an employer of choice. So there's measurable KPIs that you can put in the business case. If you've not done it yet, you haven't measured them internally, but there's a lot of research that reports on this from it's if you look on ResearchGate or Google Scholar, there's stats in the Office of National Statistics. There's various reports done by people throughout the neurodiversity industry. So take those, use them as examples, and then say, when we've done this, we'll demonstrate, we'll measure it, we'll give you the KPIs, you'll know that this is working and it was the right thing to do. Make sure that those are not empty promises, though, hey. It will improve employee engagement. So if an employee feels adequately supported, that their needs are taken seriously, that their ideas can be shared and not shot down in flames, if they feel psychologically safe to be open about their individual needs, the things that they need to help them thrive, to open doors to success for them in their roles, they're going to be more engaged. So this will ultimately improve your profitability and market share, because without getting into that capitalist thing of measuring output, this is good for performance. If you feel safe, then you're meeting the basic needs in that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then you're more likely to have innovative ideas, you're more likely to share them, and this is how companies keep their market share and progress. So, but do your research and quote and cite the sources, because this can't just be a load of anecdotal fluff you've heard on social media. It's got to be credible, or it just isn't going to work. Next slide, please.
Yeah, before we do, Charlie, I think there's a really good piece that there's a couple of bits I've been writing down as we've talked about there. The first one, you talk about Gen Z and the workforce of the future, and I think that what you've really nailed in there is that actually they're looking for an employer that meets their values, aren't they? And that's not something that I looked for when I wanted to join, the police when I was 21. I wasn't looking for anybody that met my values, but that's very much what the workforces of the future are looking for, isn't it?
It is. So they care about things like corporate social responsibility and carbon footprint and B Corp status and all sorts. But they do expect to be treated like adults and given agency and options, rather than being expected to work in a conformative way from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday in the office. So I think we'll find that if employers don't trust their staff and they don't give them that psychological safety to express their needs, that those companies are not going to survive the transition to Gen Z being the workforce of the future.
Yeah, thank you for that. On to how, thank you.
So how, I can give you examples of how to make individual policies neuro-inclusive, but I wanted to share it's more the methodology. So this is absolutely not about having your existing policies and then setting up a separate policy called neurodiversity inclusion. Like any EDI policy, yes, you can have a strategy that stands out alone. You can have a statement on your website, but it's a golden thread that runs through everything. So inclusion and accessibility affects every part of the employee life cycle. And too often I see these kind of things are focused on recruitment. What is the point in having neuro-inclusive recruitment if once a neurodivergent person is a member of the workforce, there's not that scaffolding to support them to thrive in their role? What's the point if you've already got lots of neurodivergent employees, but they don't feel psychologically safe to disclose their differences or to express their needs? So it has to go through everything. And even if you just look at recruitment, it isn't just about external recruitment, it's also about progression. So we need to identify and remove in every policy and process barriers to inclusion and accessibility. So where are the stumbling blocks that are preventing people from being able to get through this process? preventing people from being able to progress. And this is true of any kind of characteristic. It isn't just about neurodiversity. Doing an equality impact analysis on policies, you kind of need to do that at the beginning and the end. And it's possible to do that in-house if you've got the right kind of insight and you've gone through the proper training, which I believe Creased Puddle can do. You can do that. You can outsource it to organisations such as Creased Puddle. But yeah, it's got to be looking at various different angles, not just the protected characteristics. There's many resources available on the internet, so that includes ACAS guidelines and other resources. There's so much out there. It's a good idea. I don't expect human resources professionals to be employment law solicitors, but it's a good idea to have a pretty good understanding of the employment legislation and its use in practice. So like I have an autistic special interest in employment legislation and emerging case law, and I don't expect everybody to do that. But if you read the industry press, you do get an inkling of how many cases go one way or the other. And it can be quite enlightening because, like, for instance, not every employee with ADHD is automatically meeting the definition of the Equality Act. So it does depend on the extent to which there are disabling factors that interfere with your everyday ability to do your role. So really, it's a case-by-case basis. There's no broad brush that says this is a disability and this isn't. There are some characteristics which are automatically disabled under the Act, but none of the neurodivergent ones fall into that. So if you look at the case law, so I was going to look at the exact stats, but in ADHD related cases, the ones that go to tribunal, and that's only a small subsection, only about half of those are actually winning. So it could go either way. Likewise, there's a lot of generalizations in terms of things like is a formal diagnosis required in order to be able to request reasonable adjustments? And no, it isn't. So that's a massive misapprehension. And there is a lot of people talking about neurodivergence that don't fully know what they're talking about and are oversimplifying things that are actually really complicated. So just be careful where you get your information. So it's a really good idea to consult stakeholders, and that can include your neurodivergent employees. If you don't have a neurodiversity employee resource group, maybe some of them are in a disability employee resource group. If it's too small an organisation to have either, or you're just not there yet, and if you're not there yet and you want one, we can help you do that. But you could ask people through the employee forum, you can do surveys, there's all kinds of things. You can even communicate that we're looking for neurodivergent people to review and feed into a policy. But if you don't feel safe to disclose your neurodivergence, you can do it through an anonymous channel. So consult anyone who might be able to help you get this right first time. Remove ambiguity and dead ends and overcomplications. So I've seen overcomplications such as, and I'm going to talk about trans policy here rather than neuro-inclusive one, just because I think it's such a great example. A transitioning at work policy, which told people that if they want to change the name on their security pass, that they need to give HR a gender recognition certificate so that their legal name could be updated on the HR system, and then ask facilities to print them a new pass. So that is really, really an unsafe way to do it, because how much gossiping might go on in all of those people involved. But it's also a massive overcomplication, because pretty much every HR system will have a preferred name field. And my security pass said Charlie Hart, even though that's before I formally changed my name. And it's because my preferred name was printed on it. So let people put their preferred name on their security passes. That can be anything they like, as long as it's not a swear word or something. So mine could be Awesome Charlie Hart, and get that printed on a security pass. Remove the dead ends. So the dead end in that scenario I explained, it said to people to contact the HR service centre to change their name. Nobody in the HR service centre had been trained on how to deal with that, how to actually process that request, how to have a conversation with a trans employee about transitioning at work that was psychologically safe and respected their dignity and their right to privacy. So it was like a stairway to heaven going nowhere. So please just look at every process that is incorporated into your policies and think, does this go anywhere? Does it go full circle? Or am I just going to fall off a cliff with this? And then it's important to include a mechanism for periodically and continuously monitoring. Does this policy work? Are people using it? Has it been communicated effectively? Did we overlook something? I've seen quite often when policies are sent out for review that people notice the spelling mistakes and the grammatical errors and bits where it mysteriously changes font size and things like that, but they don't notice the omissions. So it's only by either running it past someone that's really got an eye for what's been left out, or monitoring it once it's gone live, that you're going to get that. And then report the benefit realization. So close that loop. If you've promised your exec team, if you've got their buy-in by saying this is going to help us with the bottom line and there are tangible statistics, KPIs that will prove it, make sure you actually do that. That's it, I think. Next slide.
Yeah, that's and do you know what? I think that's a really good point just to pull back on before we move to the next question about managing change. I wonder whether or not we make it complicated because the knowledge and the confidence in those decision-making roles is limited, is low. And so we overcomplicate things because we don't really know what we're doing. So
yeah,
maybe that's, I don't know, I've never worked in HR, but I wonder if we overcomplicate things because we don't have the confidence and we don't have the knowledge. Is that
quite possibly? Yeah, I think we're trying to include everything, but then you can overcook it a bit. And sometimes you need to be able to walk it through from the perspective of the affected employee, and then you'll see where the stumbling blocks are and where it can be streamlined.
Sure.
And that can also be done as part of the review process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so let's say we get this right then, and we're going to introduce sort of more inclusive or more neuro-inclusive ways of doing things. How do we manage that change? How do we help people to manage that change then?
Yeah, so a lot of this is about effective communication. And when you're implementing something that affects neurodivergent employees in particular, then you need to think about neuro-inclusive ways of communicating it. And it's super important to keep that employee voice going as well. So we consulted them at the outset, maybe had them involved in reviewing the policy, but let's keep that going. So when you give employees a voice, they're more likely to feel engaged, and then they're more likely to be loyal, to stay longer, to feel safe to share their ideas. It really is the magic. That's where the magic happens. So let's keep them engaged. So we could involve them in communicating the policy. Think about your communication styles. So quite often HR policies are lengthy Word documents that are quite sort of formal and litigious in their style. It doesn't mean that you can't have an easy read version. But even within the longer version, there's things that you can do to make it easier to read, like using dyslexia-friendly sans serif fonts like Arial and Helvetica. Thinking about the color contrast, so it tends to be black on white anyway, a policy. But if you're doing an easy read version of it, don't think, well, we need to dumb this down and make it all colourful, because that can actually have the opposite effect by making it inaccessible to people with reading differences or with sight differences. So it's much better like this slide here. We've got navy text against a white background, or you could have black text against a cream background, a good contrast and no overwhelming bright colours. Spacing, so you don't have to have a massive block of text paragraph and then a line space. If you put line spaces between the individual sentences, it makes things easier to read. Use lots of headings so that we know what we're looking at. And this doesn't just help dyslexic people, it also helps people with attention differences like ADHD. It helps people for whom English isn't their first language, all kinds. So it doesn't disadvantage anyone. It might take a few more pages, but hopefully we're not printing this out. You can introduce multimedia ways of communicating a policy. So I've seen a 20-page policy which was about employee well-being, but it was never brought to life through video or an interview on the employee radio or anything like that. It was just a 20-page document. But mixed media messages reach broader audiences. That's my little soundbite for you. So I wrote a document about neuro-inclusion with I explained some of the terminology and then shared 10 tips about how to be an ally to neurodivergent colleagues. And it got about 100 views, I think. I did a video version of that with captions that got 500 views in the first day. So multimedia really helps get the messages out. Involve stakeholders in the communication. So maybe it's your openly neurodivergent role models within your networks. Maybe it's your employee forum. You can do focus groups where you ask people that are interested to discuss it and spread the word. Employee surveys, that either a big one that gets this amongst other things, but you can do a pulse survey just about this. Those anonymous feedback channels can be really helpful for getting views of people who don't feel that psychological safety to be open about their needs. But let's create a culture of psychological safety, hey? And most importantly to me, I think, is demonstrate that you mean what you say. Do what you say you're going to do. Neurodivergent employees are really, really susceptible to being brought down by hypocrisy and injustice. So don't do stuff that's tokenistic that you don't mean. Don't create a 20-page employee wellbeing strategy and then tell a neurodivergent employee that you're too busy to take their needs into account. Let's actually do what we say we're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely that. And I think I share. I got. I think it was earlier on last year. Somebody sent me a 76-page report on dyslexia, and I just thought the irony. Yeah, not sure. Thank goodness for executive summaries and an inverted ruler.
I read a communication, neuro-inclusive, accessible communication policy it was, that had been written with all of the text crammed into one big block with hardly any white space and just tore it apart straight away.
Yeah, and some of these principles are really simple to use. And once you've learnt these key principles that benefit everybody, like you say, they're transferable into so many other areas, policy process, yes, but also corporate comms, how you get messages out. It just becomes so much and more creative. I think, it allows us to kind of challenge traditional ways of doing things, to actually inject some energy and some human back into some of this kind of, it's become a little bit 2D sometimes, hasn't it?
Something I see too often in the workplace is a piece of written communication that's been written like a high school essay. So it's got a title in the subject line, maybe it's got an introduction, then a load of waffle, and then the bit that you need to read. So we can take learnings from the press for this. If there's something that is the actual message that we want people to read, put that at the top in bigger text and in bold, because that's your headline. Yeah. And the waffle can go further down and people can read all of that if it really matters to them.
Yeah, absolutely that. Okay, and then the final question I want to ask you before we start taking questions. So if you've got any questions, I suggest that you start asking them in the chat. That would be brilliant. We've got some consultants some Chris Puddle consultants on the call as well today that can start to answer and comment as well. But Charlie, we get asked this question all the time about, how do you bring this up with people, either kind of physically or tangibly? How do you start conversations around neurodiversity and without kind of messing up, I guess?
Yes, yeah. So this is a really big topic, and I don't have all the answers because I've got things wrong plenty of times, I think. But I am urging people to think about the human element here, and principles like we all learn in different ways, our brains work differently, there's different kinds of minds in a team. That's been around for decades. It wasn't invented with the neurodiversity movement. So if you identify as neurodivergent and you've got needs that are not being met and you'd like them to be so you can thrive in your role, please have a human conversation with your line manager rather than backing them into a corner with, I'm disabled and you must do this. Because it is about good management, empowering people to thrive in their roles. It doesn't necessarily need to be about diagnostic labels either, because an intersectional approach is usually required. We have never got one thing going on. So if you look at me, for instance, I didn't know I was autistic till I was 42, but I did know that I did have a 15-year period where, although I was in the right role, my job itself suited my needs, I was chronically overwhelmed and experiencing what I thought was depression about once a year. I now think it was autistic burnout, but back then I didn't know I was neurodivergent, but I could have been having conversations with my manager about the things that were pushing me past my ability to cope and how to mitigate that. If I'd had that good relationship with my manager and I was in a culture of psychological safety and I didn't feel like I was perceiving dangers everywhere, we could have identified that actually it was conflicting priorities and having to mask in project team meetings, and the fact that I was trying to remember lots of things where I could have them written down in bullet points, things like that. I could have identified all of that and maybe nipped burnout in the bud. Then I wouldn't have had absences. I would have been better at my job. The deadlines would have been met without fear of me burning out and not being there. I'd never actually do that anyway. I tend to push through. But that's a human conversation. I had autism and ADHD and complex PTSD, but I didn't know any of those things. So please don't assume that this is only about people that have disclosed a disability or a neurodifference. What it's about is appreciating that every human brain and mind is different and we're wired differently and we all experience things in different ways, and there's no one size fits all. But in a culture where we're well managed and we feel safe, we can identify those needs, have them taken seriously without us feeling like a pain in the arse, without losing our dignity, and then we can all thrive and it's good for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely that. And just to back up a little bit what you were saying there about, you link it back to the Equality Act, and people will often say, well, I'm autistic, therefore I have these protections. And actually, no, when you strip back and look at what the Equality Act provides in terms of the definition of disability and when it can kick in those protections and obligations, that actually in itself advocates for needs-led, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Because
it
it
does.
doesn't talk about autism, it doesn't talk about ADHD. It has this criteria. So in a way, what we should be doing is screening for, if you just want to go the
Needs.
basics,
Yeah.
screening for the Equality Act. That's what we should
Yeah.
be using.
Yeah.
But you know, obviously we know that those employers that are going above and beyond what is required in under the Equality Act and the public service equality duty for their services and etc. as well, they're really thriving and they're retaining their staff and they're doing some really good stuff. And that's kind of where we want to be.
Yeah.
And
There's health and safety legislation as well.
yes,
So
I
a lot
was
of
just
people think
about
it
to
all
say
comes
that.
down to
Yeah.
the Equality Act.
Yeah.
But psychological safety in the workplace is a health and safety issue. If your work or the context of your work is making you sick, then you're being failed on a health and safety level. And that includes psychological injury. So
Yeah,
employers
sorry,
have a duty of care to make sure that that isn't happening.
yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm just going to go like this, and so you can't see my Great Dane in the corner because he wants to go out. But yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Becky. When he wants to go out, he'll take the door. Yes, we know, Elliot. Thank you, Becky. Okay. And on that note as well, with like the stress risk assessment. So Robert Manson, our occupational health nurse, is on the call as well today, and him and I've worked on a project which we took the questions, the actual stress risk assessment questions that were written 25 years ago, 25 years ago,
Wow.
and we brought them up to date. I know. We brought them up to date and we put them into, we used our own expertise and around question asking that we've got here at CP. And we made them neuro-inclusive so that actually if managers don't know or if individuals don't know how to start conversations, then actually there is a structure. There's already those questions out there, and you can use, because you're absolutely right, if we can ask those questions in an up-to-date format, it would identify so much anyway, and we could sort of start from there, couldn't we?
Without making people feel like they're a pain in the arse and compromising their dignity.
Yeah, absolutely that.
Yeah, because it has to be without negative implications.
Yeah, absolutely that. Charlie, I don't know how we've done this, but we've got to the questions on time.
Yeah, wow.
I'm
not wearing my reading glasses, so I can't see the chat or the time or anything.
That's all right. That's
so
my
vain.
job. That's my job, lovely. Okay. I've put we're going to go to some questions now. Before we do, there's a few things I want to draw your attention to. Number one, technology, ain't it great? You can raise your camera to the QR code on the screen, and it will take you to a section of our website whereby you can download free resources from all of our webinars this week, including occupational health, intersectionality, and HR, some top tips. It also provides you with details of our new Level 4 Workplace Needs Assessor training that we've launched this year. After a year of work and build, it's the course we've always wanted to build and deliver, and it's a purely needs-led workplace needs assessor course, which is accredited as well. So if you'd like further details on how you can apply to be on that course and the benefits and that it brings, then please, like I say, access that through the QR code and enter your details. Yeah. Oh, Charlie, I'd love you to be on that. That would be amazing. I'd love that. Okay, let's jump into some of these questions then, shall we? All right. So, okie dokie. So yes, for those people asking about the recording, because you've registered, we'll be sending you details of how you can access the recording afterwards. So yes, of course. Let's have a little look about, do we have any courses or resources on how to better write policies and documents? So yes, we do. So we have a HR course. When we say training here at Crease Puddle, we talk about training and not awareness. So we teach you how to do things in a really kind of neuro-informed way, and we've built our all of our services with those individuals who are going to be using them. So our HR process, our HR courses and inputs have been built with HR practitioners, employment lawyers, and those that directly affects over the past 5 years. So yes, you can send us a little inquiry about that. If you look on the website as well, there's loads of frequently asked questions, FAQs on there as well. So please don't be afraid to have a route around on the website for some of the free resources that we've popped on there. There's a newsletter that we routinely send out some, free stuff on there as well. We know budgets are tight, particularly in public sector at the moment. So yes, if you want to max out on free stuff, then make sure that you sign up for the newsletter as well.
And sign up for my newsletter on Substack as well, at Awesome Charlie on Substack.
I don't even know what Substack is, Charlie. I don't know.
It's a blog, but you can make it more multimedia and flashy than WordPress. So I've kind of moved across from WordPress to that. But there's video and all sorts on there. Brilliant. It's like a blog for writers.
Right. Yeah, I'll do that. Definitely do that. Okay. So yeah, Robert's our occupational health nurse as well is asking, he's absolutely still finding that managers refuse to put any adjustments in without a diagnosis. The reality is, and Robert and I have had some a lot of discussions around this. Charlie referenced the ACAS and the report last year that was the research that was released. 1,600 managers were consulting on, like, why is there a problem with implementing reasonable adjustments? And I think the highest percentage was because they are relying on a disclosure. And the second highest percentage, I think that was 79%. I think the second highest disclosure of like 59% was that they actually don't know where to start. So even it's kind of even the implementation bit. If you get a list of things that would help and support, do you do them all at once? Which one do you do once?
We should let everyone do that as well, in my opinion. So one thing that I noticed during the pandemic is it became far more apparent what the needs were of working parents, especially when the schools were shut. And people started to drop that mask where they pretend that they're just a corporate person from 9 to 5 and they keep their parenting for out of hours, and be more open about their needs because they are humans, not automatons. So I'd actually like reasonable adjustments to be open to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one thing that we've learned here at CP is that everybody having a workplace needs assessment in order to help them to identify how to thrive. Yeah. That benefits everyone, because as a manager, like, why wouldn't I want to know how to shortcut straight to the things that you're awesome at? It just seems quite logical to me that would be the case. And we have, there are organisations that we work with who will refer people to us for a workplace needs assessment, and autism, ADHD, dyslexia is not on the table. We're not discussing that. What we're inquiring, what we're curious about is how to get the best out of an individual. And I think that's a really healthy conversation, isn't it?
It is. And likewise, if you're in the UK and you want to apply for access to work to help you with the adjustments that you need for your work to help you thrive, you can identify with a disability or a neurodevelopmental condition, but they don't need the diagnosis. What they want to know about is the disabling factors and what things could help you to succeed in your role.
Yeah, absolutely that. Yeah. Thank you, Charlie. Jumping into a few more so questions. So Tracy, I'd be interested to hear Caroline's perspective on her experience of ND and any support received or not during the policing years. Didn't know I was neurodivergent when I was in the police. It explains a lot, but I didn't know that I was then. So no support put in place. It was it wasn't always good, but I think that there were certain elements of policing which suited me down to the ground. Be fast-paced, being able to move over to different jobs and different challenges, and that variance for me was what my brain needed and what kept me interested. If I to summarize, though, I think the reason that I left policing after 21 years was because I'd moved into a role where I lost meaning and purpose. And I think Charlie touched on this earlier. one thing that I see with my neurodivergent staff and colleagues, collaborators, competitors, is that we all thrive off having meaning and purpose. That very often it isn't the financial element that keeps us. It's the culture, the caring, the inclusivity, the being heard and valued, which keeps us wanting
the top
to turn
parts
up.
of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? You get the basics
absolutely.
right, you can afford to eat and have a roof over your head, and not be in fear that you're going to lose your job if you're open about a difficulty. And then you can shoot for the things that help you really thrive and innovate and be creative and do your best work.
Yeah, absolutely that. But we've got to get that foundation level. We've got to get that in place first, haven't we, Charlie?
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a little look at some of the comments as well. I noticed that we've got a comment from the rather wonderful Kate Matchant. Thank you for joining us, Kate. Kate has done some brilliant work in this space. She's a HR professional, and has really been, I hope I'm not making you feel uncomfortable, Kate, but you've done some brilliant work with your organisation, and it's been a pleasure to work alongside you. And as you move into other challenges and other spheres, it's hopefully you'll take us with you. But you've done a great job in your current employer. Yeah, you're launching a new policy. I just think that's awesome, and it's been great to work with you on that. Okay. As someone who's neurodiverse and dyslexic, so lucky to have a line manager that sits down and asks, "What can I do to support you better?" It makes such a big difference and helps me feel listened to and supported. Yeah, and that's the thing, Hannah, is that sometimes it doesn't take a lot. And when we talk about starting conversations, I think one of the things that we'll say when we're sat down with a manager who feels safe enough to say, "I don't know what questions to ask. I don't know how to start this conversation, and I'm scared of saying something wrong, and I don't know what I'm doing," and they know so much more about it than me. We will just say, "Be curious."
Oh yeah.
Just start there. Just be curious, open-minded, have a growth mindset.
Neither side will have all the answers either. So I've seen employers and managers who think that their newly diagnosed neurodivergent employee who's still going through the learning curve of what it actually means to them will know exactly what will help them thrive in their role. And likewise, neurodivergent employees who don't know much, thinking that managers will have all the answers when they're not experts on their conditions. So we need to work together on this and work with work needs assessors. And you can even ask ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT what typically an HR analyst might benefit from as a reasonable adjustment for complex PTSD, where the triggers are things like low mental health and low morale in the people she's working with. And it reeled off loads of stuff, some of which was guff and some was really helpful.
I like that. Some of it was just guff.
Yeah.
And some of it was helpful. And I suppose that's the thing, is that if we are moving into the AI space, it's about knowing which is running that past somebody, isn't it? To say, is this bit nonsense, or is this bit useful? Because I know that's very much a conversation that we're having at the moment, with how that then aligns with, neuro inclusion and conversations and everything else is kind of, where that sits. But I know lots of people that are using AI to be able to navigate things and challenges that they're experiencing on a daily basis. And it comes with a caution, obviously, but I don't think we should be ignoring the benefits that it can bring, for sure. There's a comment in here from Tracy, and I'm going to because it mentions the Equality Act. Charlie, do you want to also found out that if the Equality Act isn't likely to apply, employers feel they don't have to implement adjustments, etc.
Who do they think decides whether something applies or not, though? That's the question I often ask.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
So does the employer think that they can decide that that person doesn't have a disability if the employee has decided that they do, and that they feel they meet the requirements of the definition? Because actually, if it ended up in a tribunal, it would be an employment tribunal that decides. So it really rings alarm bells with me when employers think they can decide. Maybe they've sought advice for an employment law solicitor, but to me, I think it would be much safer if they could work on the assumption that the person meets the definition and then work with them to help in their role. It'll keep them out of a tribunal and it'll help them get the best out of their member of staff. And it doesn't mean every request is reasonable, of course. So, but sometimes there's a bit of a negotiation and you can agree to something on a trial basis, you can compromise, there's all kinds of things that can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to reduce this fear in HR, I think, as well, don't we? That you referenced it earlier, that there's a real reliance on HR, that kind of it's, line managers will go to HR, people will go to HR as the experts, but HR aren't born with this knowledge either. We had this conversation with Robert and occupational health yesterday, that it's about upskilling and empowering and getting behind HRs, and for them to feel that they're also comfortable to say, do you know what, I actually don't know, but let's find out, or let's seek some support or otherwise. But I think that sometimes, because of the position that they're put in, that they don't always feel that they can say, I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes I think people can kind of pretend that they know everything because they think it will damage their professional credibility if they admit there's something they don't know. But HR professionals are expected to know about such a broad variety of stuff, and it can come down to organising Christmas parties and all kinds of things that are really not within the remit. So do you want us to all be employment law solicitors as well? No, we can get a pretty basic understanding and give it all due thought and consideration, but we're not going to be experts in everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's have a little check just to see if we've got any questions that we haven't asked. Stress risk assessments are the question. So we're going to be running some workshops for those of you who want to join us. So stay in touch, sign up for the newsletter, and you could be able to get some details of those workshops as we release them further into the year. If you want to know a little bit more about those. Is there a list of examples of reasonable adjustments or things that can help? Like you mentioned, both my manager and myself don't always know what the answers are. However, if I saw a list, it might help me to identify new things I've never thought of, which may be a huge benefit to everybody, Hannah. Yeah, absolutely. So quickly from us, do you know what? Ranging from DARE reasonable adjustment report right through to, which was a good few years ago, but there are thousands of examples of reasonable adjustments on the internet you can research, but only kind of a proper workplace needs assessment will make it bespoke to you, Hannah. Would be my advice to that, because everybody is so very different, and those intersectional elements of what make you you are considered within a proper needs-led workplace needs assessment. Is that your experience as well, Charlie?
Yeah, definitely. So I've only ever had one, and it was after my access to work. So my access to work case manager said to me, "What do you think you need?" And I said, "I don't really know." So she said, "Okay, I'm going to refer you for a work needs assessment." And it was quite a long conversation, and some of what they suggested I haven't really used, but others have been really brilliant and really helped me. That's in my self-employed role that I do now. I'd never had anything like that when I worked in HR. It's almost like we get forgotten about our needs to get put last. But yeah, they're
thank you.
Skilled, qualified work needs assessors will know a lot more than we will when we're going through this learning curve.
Totally. Charlie, thank you so much, and thank you to everybody that's joined us on this webinar this morning. It's Friday. It's the last day of Neurodiversity Celebration Week for us anyway, at least. Charlie's got one more.
I've got 2 talks left, I think.
Two more for you.
I've got a corporate one at lunchtime. Yeah, and an official one at 3:30, and then I'm done.
Thank you for joining us from all over the UK and the beyond. I've seen where you're from in the chat comments, and it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you. Stay in touch, keep doing what you're doing, and take care. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.